Hi, my name is Leslie Burgoyne. I'm managing attorney in the Galveston branch office at Lone Star Legal Aid. We are here today doing a local law live, and today's topic is going to be legal issues that are impacting the HIV positive community. With me today is our community partner here in Galveston. We have Access Care of Coastal Texas. And so I wanted to give a warm welcome to Access Care of Coastal Texas. Could you gentlemen please introduce yourselves and then tell me what you do and what Access Care does in general?
Hi, my name is Stephen Starkey. I'm the Chief Program Officer. I'm basically involved in any client or community interaction. And what ACCT does is we provide free testing towards prevention and care of the HIV virus.
And I'm Joe Rios. I'm the housing coordinator. In our department, we provide housing and assistance for people who are HIV positive. We have emergency housing, we have a long-term housing, we also have PHP, which is deposits to help people get into housing.
My name is Jake Goldner. I work with Joe in the housing department here at ACCT, again, doing anything that we can to help our clients secure or obtain ongoing or new housing.
Well, again, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here so we can have an introduction to topics that relate specifically to your client community. This is a very important topic for me in particular. If there is somebody that you love that is HIV positive, then the stigma that attaches to that person, and you just, for me personally, I just want to, protect that person. It just gets my maternal instincts going. But I wanted to show a couple of statistics here because we haven't been hearing about HIV in the news lately. It's all about coronavirus or now monkeypox. But the reality is that it doesn't appear that HIV incident rate has gone down significantly. As you can see in these charts, what I pulled from the state of Texas website is that the number of new cases has remained fairly steady, if not gone up a little bit over the last few years. And then the rate in Texas has remained pretty steady. So according to this, for every 100,000 people, there are approximately 24.9 people that are HIV positive. So that's a very large client community. Now, I'm with Lone Star Legal Aid, and we provide legal services to anybody who is low income, who meets the certain financial criteria. Can you guys tell me a little bit about what Access Care of Coastal Texas clients, what is it? Are they all required to be HIV positive? Is it, what's your client requirements?
Sure, but one quick backup. We have two other ACCT staff members. I'd like them to introduce themselves. Kristen?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Kristen Rowe, and I'm the Director of Client Services here at ACCT.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for joining us. So again, we were talking about the overlap. I made this cute little Venn diagram to talk about the overlap between who might be a Lone Star Legal Aid client and who might be a client for Access Care of Coastal Texas. Can you tell us what your client, what your requirements are for helping people?
Most importantly, our services are directed towards people living with HIV and AIDS. So a positive diagnosis is required for our services. Although we do help in the community for the prevention piece, but our social services are centered towards people living with HIV and AIDS.
All right, and you said you also do testing, right? And so obviously you're testing people who haven't tested positive previously. I wanted to talk about areas of the law specific to your clients. And so I thought of a couple of general areas, such as public benefits, applying for Social Security, or applying for Medicare or Medicaid. So can you tell me if, do you guys have a lot of clients with issues related to either Social Security benefits or Medicare or Medicaid benefits? And what issues are you seeing?
Most definitely. Kristen, I'll let you go into detail on that.
Yeah, so we have a lot of clients that actually qualify for Social Security and disability benefits, as well as Medicare and Medicaid, but it's really the navigation process that they have the most trouble with: how to apply, where to apply, what exactly they'll need to apply. Those sort of things tend to be the barriers going into that kind of application.
Yeah.
And if I could add also, here recently, we've seen a very large uptick in people losing their benefits. They're getting reassessed and they're not involved in the process, or they're missing a piece of mail or a contact, and they all of a sudden find themselves with no income. So we're really trying to help people scramble and get their benefits back.
Good, yes. What about in regards to Medicare or Medicaid? Are there any ongoing issues with people, your clients, that are being denied or having their Medicaid or Medicare services terminated?
I mean, on Medicare, it's really tied to the Social Security piece. So you
Right.
lose that, you lose the other.
Right.
Medicaid, on the other hand, it's really transitions in life. Maybe someone is going into incarceration or things like that. It's a life change and they lose their benefit. It's getting it back.
Yeah. Yeah, we certainly have had several clients who lost their benefits when they became incarcerated, and they needed to reapply for benefits upon their release. And that requires gathering a lot of medical records and building your case to prove that you're that you're disabled. So and I know that for our clients, a lot of times there's a problem getting with our clients being able to afford doctor appointments to be able to establish that evidence to get on disability. So does your organization provide any type of medical services or anything like that, where you could help people with the documentation aspect?
I'll let Kristen fill on that also. The only thing I want to say is there is Ryan White healthcare for people living with HIV and AIDS. It is specific to HIV, but HIV isn't really recognized as a disability for Social Security anymore. So it's kind of a tricky slope trying to get other diagnosis done. Kristen, you have anything to add?
Actually, that's exactly what I was going to add, was the dual diagnosis portion of what we're seeing with all of our clients. Financially, we do have assistance through our organization to get them to doctor's appointments. We also have a partnership with another organization that does indigent care here in our area. And like you said, Ryan White Assistance also is available to our clients. So financially, getting to the appointment isn't necessarily the problem. It's the dual diagnosis piece that I think is the issue.
Again, if I could tack onto that, the biggest loophole that we have is mental health, finding the resources to treat, to diagnose. The wait list is very long for that.
Absolutely. I wanted to move on to other areas of law that would affect your clients. I know the big one right now is landlord-tenant law. There is an eviction crisis happening right now, and but it's not just evictions. There's also forcing landlord to make repairs, or dealing with the landlord who has illegally locked you out or interrupted your utilities. But I think as far as the HIV positive community, I don't know that those issues impact them any more than the rest of the population. My concern with the HIV positive community would be to what degree they're being discriminated against, because clearly HIV is a medical condition, and that is under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a protected class. So obviously they cannot face discrimination in housing, but I also know reality is reality. And so I'm just wondering how often you guys see instances where somebody wouldn't normally have been evicted or locked out, but because of their positive status, they were.
I can't think of anybody was facing discrimination because of HIV, other than just normal landlord tenant issues of not paying the rent on time or destroying property or something like that.
Yeah, and but are you dealing with the eviction crisis as much as we are here at Lone Star Legal Aid?
To an
Yeah.
extent, we are. To back up a little bit, due to HIPAA, there's no communication with the property owner or landlord in regards to medical, unless the client decides to disclose that. So we really don't run into that. But as far as evictions, what we're running into is it's kind of tied to the loss of social benefits. They're all of a sudden, they can't pay their, now, if they're on our long-term program, we can go in and we can go to 100%, but it's the emergency program. And this year and last year, due to COVID, had, I would say, a 50 to 75% increase in funding that we had to support these families to keep them housed.
So the eviction crisis, I believe is ongoing and isn't really getting any better. I think that the worse the economy gets, the worse that crisis will get. So I don't think that we've seen even the tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. But moving on, I want to talk about other issues of the law that impact your client community. I know, like anybody, your clients have concerns about what happens, when they die, or concerns about what happens if someone they love passed away and there's some property involved. So I'm sure that probate issues affect your client community. Have you seen any of those issues?
I can speak to a couple of issues that have come up, and it is usually domestic partnerships. They did not go through with marriage, and determination of how to handle the remains. And if they didn't complete that paperwork prior to the passing of the individual, it's a major obstacle course for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the other last category, which I knew would be a big one, but family law issues. Because your client community has the same level of family law disputes as the rest of the community. However, they've got that stigma associated with it. So I wonder if that makes it more difficult for your clients in custody battles or things like that. Have you seen any of that stuff?
I haven't seen any. Have you, Kristen?
Not necessarily for child custody or protective orders, but maybe so more divorces. Honestly, I feel like a lot of the people that we encounter that are getting divorces have just a tougher time doing so, mostly because either the partner contracted HIV after their relationship has already demised, and now they're feeling uncomfortable with their children being around that now person that is HIV positive, so it's really more that. And I wanted to touch a little bit on the probate part as well. We are working with a predominantly aging population at this point. So having drafts of wills and designated powers of attorneys and things like that are so important, because in the beginning of this epidemic, there were so many people that were passing away without having all of those things already established. And now people that have lived through all of that are taking all of these things a lot more seriously and making sure that all of their paperwork is taken care of before they're going into the final stages of their life.
Yeah, so Lone Star Legal Aid would be happy to help. So certainly apply for services either online or by phone. We'll talk about how that process works in a minute, but we do not only medical powers of attorney, but also durable powers of attorney. Now, a durable power of attorney is is one that will survive even if your competence level decreases. If you are in a coma, those powers of attorney are necessary to have in place before that happens so that you can avoid having a guardianship. Because a guardianship legal process is expensive and a pain. And again, you can avoid all of that by having that power of attorney up front, and then also a designation of guardian, so that if guardianship does become necessary, you can designate who you would like to be your guardian. And then what an advance directive is tells your doctor in advance whether you want to be resuscitated. So it's, do not resuscitate type order, but it also, communicates your intentions with your medical staff about pulling the plug and things that those, you never want to have to think about in advance. But the reality is that you need to make your opinions known to your family and people that love you in advance, so that they don't end up in a legal battle. But yes, as far as help, Lone Star Legal Aid can absolutely help with all of these issues. I wanted to go on to one more screen because I did a little bit of research on laws here in Texas that apply specifically to the HIV positive community. One of the things that I found really interesting is that in Texas, a minor doesn't have the legal consent to enter into any contracts or to make any type of legal decisions about themselves. There is an exception for HIV testing and treatments, that a minor has the ability to consent to HIV testing and treatments. And again, for me as an attorney, I thought, that's interesting, because it seems to me that's really like the only exception. Minors, they can't enter into contracts, they can't make medical decisions for themselves, but yet they can consent to HIV testing and treatment. I was really impressed that was here in the law, considering that we're in Texas. So the other thing that I found that was interesting is that when you're consenting to medical treatment, like in the doctor's office, and you sign that general consent to medical treatment, that's all they really need these days in order to test you. You can verbally, as long as you have the general consent for treatment signed, you can verbally consent to being tested for HIV. And I think, I don't know if that's new, because I know in the past it was always paperwork that you had to sign. And so I feel like whenever this law was enacted, it reduced the amount of paperwork required. Now, you guys do a lot of testing at your facility, is that correct?
Yes.
Is any specific paperwork required to be tested, or an ID? Like, what does somebody need in order to walk in and get tested at your facility?
Well, all testing's done anonymously, so we don't ask for an ID, but we do ask to fill out an information form. And really that is so we can tailor our counseling prior to the test and get the best information to that person. One thing I want to mention on consent, a transition that we've seen, I want to say within the last 12 to 16 months, we're seeing a lot of hospitals, their emergency rooms are transitioning from an opt-in to an opt-out. So you're automatically getting tested for HIV in the emergency room. You have to opt out.
Interesting. I did find a lot of confidentiality laws. I mean, everybody knows HIPAA, and that's, the big one. But Texas has some very specific Texas laws that pertain to confidentiality. And I was impressed that Texas law seems to go above and beyond the federal laws when it comes to confidentiality requirements and penalties for violating. So I felt like Texas had a pretty robust confidentiality portion of state law. which again, we've got HIPAA laws anyways. So I was kind of proud of Texas in that regards, but coming back to testing, I was interested to know that this state law actually requires HIV testing during prenatal visits. Do you guys do any type of prenatal testing, or is that all handled by a medical doctor?
We've not done it before. It's usually covered, whether they're on Medicaid through that program or their doctor's office. It's part of their prenatal care.
Yeah. So, so I didn't know that, but now I do, that you are actually required to be tested during your first trimester and during your third trimester. So that was interesting. And then I also found out that if a woman shows up in labor and they don't have any of her prenatal medical records, they are required to do an expedited test for any woman in labor. And then if that test is somehow unavailable or inconclusive, then there is expedited testing of the newborn as soon as the newborn is born. So it seems like with these required testings of pregnant women and newborns, it seems like we're capturing, in theory, all of the positive babies that are being born. Do you think that that has an impact? Are you noticing whether there's been some type of an increase in child cases or cases of juveniles being positive?
Yeah, so actually with all of those things, it really is reducing the risk of transmission between mother and baby. That's why they're doing those tests in the first and third trimester, in order for the mother to begin a regimen and become undetectable to where they cannot transmit to the child afterwards. That was new information to me about giving birth to a baby and not having any of that information available, and what the consequences would be of that. But still, those are great tools to use after the baby is born in order to, again, prevent transmission.
Right. And the confidentiality, even though I was saying that I felt like Texas state law confidentiality provisions are fairly robust, there is a specific requirement to report any positive HIV positive result to the state of Texas. But I think that requirement pretty much exists with any type of positive result of any communicative disease. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily HIV specific or what, but I do know that there is a reporting requirements. And so I'm assuming that you since you guys do testing, you also, that reporting requirement applies to you guys as well?
It does, but we go through the county because they have to do the confirmation test.
Right. Okay. So yeah, do you work closely with the county on public health issues such as these?
Yes, between
Yeah.
UTMB and Galveston County as well. I wish we could get more involved in Brazoria and Matagorda because we also cover those counties.
Yes. Do you ever do any kind of outreach in Brazoria or Matagorda County?
Brazoria, Kristen can talk to that.
Yeah, Brazoria has some really great mental health and rehabilitation places that have given us the opportunity to have a platform to educate on HIV as well as prevention. And so we have recently gotten into going to those facilities and doing HIV testing. Matagorda has turned out to be a very different beast, one that we have not been able to tackle yet, but are still avidly trying to get into.
Well, Lone Star Legal Aid has an office in Angleton as well. So maybe if you guys ever do any outreach in that area, maybe we can collaborate on that together.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
No, we've talked a lot about the various types of legal services that your client population might need. But I haven't really talked about how somebody would go about getting legal services from Lone Star Legal Aid. And so I wanted to kind of just give an overview, just to educate you and anyone listening on what the process is. And so when somebody has a legal issue, whether they just need advice or they've got an upcoming court date or what, the quickest and easiest thing is to go online to our website and apply for services. And then, you know, you enter your information, and then somebody from Lone Star Legal Aid calls you back because there's more specific details that we want to get that we don't necessarily want to convey over the internet, right? And so somebody will call you to complete that application. And some of the questions are pretty invasive, you know, because we have to screen for certain grants and things like that. So of course, we're going to ask if you're a veteran or a victim of a crime or things like that. So, but we also have to get details regarding income and assets because we have limitations. You know, we can't help people that are above 200% of the federal poverty level. So that's why we have to get that information. And then once your application is processed, then it's, you know, it is determined, a determination is made as to whether or not you're eligible for our services. And so assuming that you are and you qualify and you're eligible, then we have to also run a conflict check. Just like with any attorney, any law office that you talk to, they have to run a conflict check. We have to make sure that we've never represented the opposing party, or that we've never represented somebody against you and things like that. So there are ethical considerations. Once a conflict check is done, then we have to make the determination on staff availability. So, and that's a pretty important aspect too, because again, we are in the middle of an eviction crisis. And as a nonprofit, we always have more people that need help than people we can help. So, so that's kind of the last step in applying for services that, you know, what people would go through. So again, Lone Star Legal Aid can help with all of these issues. We can help people apply for Social Security, or people who have had their Social Security reduced or cut off. If they get some kind of a denial, there is an appeals process that is multiple levels. So we can help with those appeals. We can help people with drafting their estate planning documents, drafting a will, or drafting those powers of attorney that we talked about. We can also help with family law issues, protective orders, divorces, custody battles, and of course, we're always here to help with the housing issues. That is, I would say, a majority of what I'm focused on here in Galveston lately is the landlord-tenant issues. So again, please encourage your client population to apply for us. And I would like to be able to send some of our clients to you guys for services if and when the need comes up in the future. Okay. So do you have any questions, or is there any other topics that you wanted to talk about that pertain to the law and your client population?
You covered literally everything that I could have dreamed of talking about in this conversation.
Well, good. So again, I'm Leslie Burgoyne. I've put my email address on this last slide. So please don't hesitate to email me. And then I just have a little disclaimer that none of this in today's presentation is construed to be legal advice. This is just general information. And then of course, Lone Star Legal Aid does not discriminate. And so that being said, I believe that's all we've got for today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me personally or go online to our website to apply for services.